will share screen. Okay, so I really went back and forth about what was the best next thing for us to tackle. I think I've told you guys before that I'm used to having a whole term where we just do HTML, and then another whole term where we just do the CSS. But I think that I decided that we've done enough CSS for this week because you guys already know some type formatting, and now based on the recording for today, you also can do some box model stuff. So the box model properties that I covered were just an introduction to backgrounds, and all I did was a background image, and padding, which is space inside of an element, border, of course the border around an element, and then margin, which is the space between elements. So went over that stuff a bit, and I wanted to go further, but I wanted to also keep the scope of the recording from getting too large. So what I'm going to be doing is backing off just a little bit from that, and I want to show you a little bit more markup that's going to be necessary for project 1. With the exception of the forms and the images next week, or the media elements next week, it's the only other thing that we need to get started on the markup, which is the navigation. So being able to create hyperlinks, which are the clickable hypertext between pages. That's what the hypertext is, a hypertext markup language and hypertext transfer protocol. Both means clickable text. And so I think that we're going to go ahead and do that. And then tomorrow, to whatever extent we need to, we'll do a little bit more styling with CSS so that we can start getting ready to say, okay, how are we going to do layouts on these? They're going to be pretty simple layouts. I'm not expecting anything really complex. You know, it's a simple website. It should be a simple layout. We may get to a little bit of it tonight. We'll see. So, without further ado, this is the page of markup. Well, this is as far as I got with the formatting. So this was some of the box model stuff applied to this page. This is a different page because I felt like I had taken Goopy's resume about as far as I could have. It didn't contain multiple paragraphs like this. And now that I've got a document like this, I think we can take it a little bit further. It's also got a little bit of a representation here about what the navigation might be structured like. It's not an appropriate markup yet. It's just some text with the little pipes in between them. So this is what we're going to convert into an actual navigation. Now, in case anyone's done markup before, if you've done any HTML or even looked at any HTML before, there are a lot of websites out there that structure a navigation list in an unordered list, which is not an unreasonable way to do it. I did it for years and years. I mean, most of my career, actually. I created an unordered list. You guys know what that is. And inside each list item, inside each LI, was a hyperlink. And then we would do all kinds of CSS styling to make it not look like a bulleted list anymore. That's not the problem. The problem is that I became more aware in the past few years that there's an accessibility problem with putting your hyperlinks into a list item like that. And that is that the entire list item elements, like all the element names, get read aloud when someone is using a screen reader, which is a accessibility tool for people with visual impairments that will read aloud the page to you. And, you know, they use their own kind of navigation and so on. But anyway, it really gets in the way of people trying to use a screen reader to get to the content of your web page. So I stopped doing it that way. And we're going to do a rather stripped down navigation structure here. So here's what I've got so far. And it's just a nav element here. And let's go ahead and I'm going to put this into a comment. So that we can actually get in some of these links here. It's still going to say home, about, learning, and contact. And by the way, this is a structure for your navigation that a lot of you will probably have. Something, if not exactly this, something pretty darn close to this for an informational website with 4 pages. It's almost certainly going to be home, about, learning, and contact, or something like that. So anyway, let's go ahead and get these guys in here. So the basic element for a hyperlink is an anchor tag. And it's called an anchor tag because once upon a time, we used to link to them as well as linking from them to other things. You still can, we just don't do it very much anymore. But anyway, that's why it's called hyperlink and not like link or HL or something like that. So it is an A for anchor. And I'm just going to go ahead and make one and put the home text into it. Just putting it inside an A link. Here, let me zoom in and touch for you guys. This is not enough to turn it into an actual hyperlink yet. If I go over here and refresh in the browser, now we've just got the one because the other ones are commented out. But notice it's not clickable. It doesn't even look like a link. It's not going anywhere. So this is not enough by itself. In order to make it work as a hyperlink, you've got to have an href attribute. And we've encountered the href attribute once before. Take a look at this guy, right? Link rel equals style sheet, href equals, and then it points to a pathway to your CSS file. So href stands for hyperreference. It just means it's referencing another document or sometimes an anchor within your own document. And that same attribute is used both for the link and for the hyperlink. So I'm just going to put href equals and then just leave these as empty quotes for right now. And I'm going to save that and go over here and refresh in the browser, and all of a sudden, yes, it is a link. Look at that. It changed the formatting. That color is definitely not going to work against that dark blue background. And it gave it an underline, which I don't really care for. But again, I mean, this is standard formatting. This is formatting that goes back at least a couple of decades. Putting this dark blue-violet color on them and putting the underline on them, it's just what people expect. Everybody knows what that is. But later on, we'll explore CSS for changing the way that looks. Now, I'm going to go ahead and build the other 4 anchors in here, and then we'll start putting in the actual values for href. So first things first, let's get the structure in there. Now notice I'm not putting these into a UL with LIs. Like I said, I used to do that. I don't anymore for accessibility reasons. This one's going to be about. Of course, I could just copy and paste the stuff from the comment, but this is for reference. I mean, this is easy enough. Type it again. Okay, learning. And then contact. So like this will be your splash page, your welcome page, where you have the big hero image or whatever, or hey, welcome to our website about boogie boarding or whatever. And then the about, and then I've called it a gallery page, but all that's really required for this page is that it has multiple media elements on it. That's why I called it learning for my demo. Maybe I'll have multiple images with a little description next to each one. Here's how you grab onto your surfboard, and here's how you, time your riding the wave, or whatever, who knows what. So anyway, these are basic structures here for anchors, and if I go over here and refresh, now I've got the 4. Remember that any space in HTML is treated as a space bar, so that's why these are separated by a space, because I put these on different lines here. If I were to take these and put them all into one line, like so. See how the space disappears between those guys? It's just the way HTML works. It's kind of, it's quirky, but overall I think it's a good thing that it does that. Okay, so let's talk about the hyperreference now and pathways to other files. So there are basically 3 different kinds of pathways that you can have inside of an href. One of those is an in-page link. So remember I was saying we linked 2 anchors. You can link 2 elements inside your own page. You've probably been on a page like that before where you've got navigation and you tap on something up here, and instead of taking you to a different page, it takes you further down the page. And maybe there's a link down there that says back to top, and you click that, it takes you back up to the top of the page. You can do that without any JavaScript or anything like that. It's built into the HTML. I don't think that we need to go over that right now. It's pretty easy to do. But if anybody's interested, I'll let you know. The second one is called a relative pathway link, or just a relative pathway. And what it does is it references another file within the same directory structure. You guys know what I mean by that. It's just the folders where all your files are sitting in. If you want to point from one file to another file in there, that's a relative pathway. It's a very simple thing to do. Absolute pathway, which we will do probably next week, is when you're referencing a completely different website online. And it's called absolute because it's linking to a place with an HTTP address, a TCP IP address that is unique in all the universe, right? So it's a absolute pathway. So all I'm going to be doing today is relative pathway links, and that's it. So what this is, okay, so right now I've got an index.html. I don't even have the other files, so the links aren't going to work, but let's take a look at what they're going to be anyway. Index.html is what you always want to name your home page. You don't want to call it home or my index or my cool surfing start page or anything like that. It's really got to be index.html or index.php, one of those two. If it's not one of those, and you upload these files to an actual web server, like for IS250.com, and someone comes along and goes to IS250.com, they won't be able to see a home page because the browser won't be able to find one. It's always going to look for an index page with either .html or .php extension. That's pretty much it. So I know that the home page is going to have to be index.html, and here it is. And this will eventually be my index.html for the demos for next week. I'll get rid of this content and put some actual project content in here, or some example project content. Right now, this is just lorem ipsum text, which, by the way, if you ever need some of this stuff, you can just go to lipsum.org, and they've got a text generator down here with some of these fields. You can generate as many paragraphs or sentences or whatever as you want to. There are other ones online too that some think are more fun. I usually just use the Lipsum. But anyway, that's where you get that stuff from. So that's the first one. And notice that there's nothing in front of it. I don't have to say, well, yeah, this is inside X folder, and I don't have to link back to the C drive or use HTTP at the front of it or www or anything like that. As long as the file is in the same folder, and they can see each other directly, right? The one you're linking to and the one you're linking from, they're in the same folder, they can see each other, then all you need is the file name, and that's it. So this one down here would be about.html. You generally want the file name to match the actual name of the file. It's kind of an SEO thing, from what I understand. This would be learning.html. Notice, however, I'm not putting in any capitals. The one that's really important not to is index. HTTP is it's cap sensitive, not for domain names so much, but for file names. If I do this, for instance, with a capital I, the server won't be able to find the home page because it considers this to be a different file from index like that. So my strong recommendation is all file names, just do them all lowercase. And if you need to string two words together, like say I wanted to call this surf learning or something like that, then use a hyphen like that. This is just old conventions that everybody knows about. But just single words, lowercase, is the way it's recommended. So, and this would be contact again without the capital, .html. So just so we can test this out real quick, I'm just going to duplicate this file really quickly. So let's see, let me go over here. And this is, again, this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to copy this thing and let me rename it. Go away. And let's call this about. And I'm just going to open this up with Visual Studio Code. And just so we can see the difference here, the page name, instead of CSS type formatting, I'm just going to call this about. Okay, so we'll be able to see the difference when we actually open this page. So I've got these both saved. And now I've got the file available. All I have to do is refresh this page. Notice the different color here, by the way. And I know these colors are horrific right now. They do not work over this dark background. But in any case, the home is this violet color, and the other ones are this really bright blue-violet color. This is just a different CSS applied to a link that's been visited. And I haven't clicked on this link to go anywhere, but I've already opened index.html, so the browser knows I've already been to this one. But I haven't been to this one yet. So let me just go ahead and go back and forth here. Click on About, and see this is the About page, and it says about.html. If I click on Home, it takes me back to the CSS type formatting page, which is my index. So that's how it works. If they're both in the same folder like this, then all you need is the file name. And so that's what you guys should do too, for the time being at least. All your HTML files should just be able to see each other, all kind of souping together in the root folder, and then we'll have subfolders for CSS and images and fonts and things like that. Now I will do a couple more things with links. It's still only 6:40, we're doing fine. It's a very common accessibility thing to put a title on these, especially to your internal links. This is actually another SEO type thing. Search engines love to see file names that match, heading names that match like the title of the link that goes there and so on. Everything matches up, then we figured that we really know what our content is. So even if it's just a matter of going like home or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's see, title equals, like, I don't know, about surfing or whatever. Now here's the trouble with this. Let me go, this is the About page. Notice what I was talking about here. Like I'm starting to make edits to one page, and I wasn't even sure which page I was on until I looked. Those edits do not automatically show up on the other page, right? That's what I was talking about like get one page built as completely as you can before duplicating it, because otherwise every change you make, you're going to have to make on multiple pages. So like if this were my actual project, and I will put in these titles in, and it looks like I've got an error here. There we go. So title equals, I don't know, learn about surfing, or something like that, and title equals contact us. So first things first, if I made these edits here and I'm working with multiple pages that I've already saved, if I want to keep working on those pages, I now have to take these lines of code and remember to copy and paste them to all my other pages so that everything is consistent with everything else. Now, it's not that hard to do. It's just, for me at least, it's hard to remember to do it and be consistent about it. I've made all kinds of errors in copy and pasting stuff and forgetting to copy and paste stuff between pages. So that's the number one thing. But let's go ahead and save these guys and refresh in the browser. And the title, as far as accessibility stuff goes, there's a way of naming something that the user actually can interact with, unlike like ID and classes, which just do nothing. Like as a user, I'll never see the ID and class names that I have on stuff here. But the title, if I hover over this, see this little pop-up, contact us, and this one learning about, oh, okay, surfing. Okay, I'm going to learn about surfing. That's the idea. And then also, as I said, important for SEO. So it's a common thing to have titles on there, and I recommend it, although I don't require it. But I wanted to show you that as well. So the other kind of link that I wanted to put in here, I'm not going to put into a nav. I'm just going to put into, I'll actually put it into the header here, I think. Let me see, CSS type formatting, yeah. Let's say I've got, this is all some very important contact that I've sourced from somewhere online. And I guess I really should have had a page all ready to go, but let me just go ahead, and since I'm kind of doing the surfing thing right now, I'm just going to find a website that talks about surfing. National Geographic Society, okay, there we go. And I'm going to grab this link, and let's just pretend I've grabbed some content from this National Geographic page, .org/encyclopedia/surfing. And I'm going to copy that, and I want to create a link in here at the top of the page, because this is where I've gotten my content from, and I need for my users to be able to see that. And as far as you guys are concerned, you need for your instructor to be able to see that, because that's where part of the points come from, right? So I'm going to put it inside a paragraph here, and I'm going to say, I don't know, something simple. I mean, it could also easily be at the bottom of the page, but I'm just putting it at the top for demo here. From National Geographic. And let's see which page. I must know I'm on the index page now. Okay, good. So there it is, content from National Geographic, and I want to put a link into just the words National Geographic here. So I'll wrap National Geographic in an anchor, and I'll be sure to put an href equals and I'll put the content in between the opening and closing anchor. Now this is enough to turn this into an anchor link if it's got an href on it. And it's interesting, it thinks it knows, like it's showing me a visited link there. Well, I'm surprised about that. Oh, you know what? No, I get it. I get why. Never mind. Okay, so the reason why I'm jumping through all these hoops here is so that I can get an absolute pathway link in this. Remember, these are all relative pathways here that are just referencing other files within the same folder. But now I want to reference something that's like way outside my folder, right? It's hosted online. And so I can put this in here, but I need the entire link. So where is it? Here we go. So some people might say, okay, well, I'm going to grab this, the www.nationalgeographic.org and encyclopedia, and paste it in here. But that's actually not the complete address. You actually want the whole thing, including the HTTP or HTTPS in this case. So I'll do Control-L to grab the entire URL and copy it and paste it into the value of the hyperreference here. So make sure you get the entire thing, including the HTTP at the beginning, / www, all that stuff. So let's go back over here and refresh. And now when I click on this, it will take me to the National Geographic page here. And there it is. Now, usability-wise, interface-wise, this is not a good thing. Yeah, it took me to the page, right? But it also took me the user away from my website. I don't want that to happen. I want them to be able to stay on my website, but still follow the link where they got this from. And for that reason, an absolute pathway link will almost always have another attribute on it. If the internal links or the relative links get titles, this tends to get a target. And what this is for, if I put underscore blank in here, what this tells the browser is when the user clicks on this or taps on it or follows it in some way, don't open it in the same tab, open up a new tab for it. That's what the underscore blank does. So if I save that and go over here and refresh my page, now when I follow this link, opens up a new tab, user goes through, oh, okay, I can see what, oh yeah, here's where I got the content from. Okay, cool. They close it, and guess what? My website's still there waiting for them. That's not me being selfish and wanting to keep people on my website. I mean, I do, but it also helps. I mean, I personally am irritated when I follow an external link as a surfer, as a user, and then I close the tab and it takes, like, it dumps me completely out of where I was and puts me somewhere else entirely. I don't like that as a user, and I think a lot of users don't. So this is a good thing to have on there just for the external links. Do not put them on your internal links. Do not put them on your relative links that take you to other pages of your website. Nobody likes a navigation system that continually opens up a new window every time they click on a link to get to a different page in a website, and they wind up with like 20 tabs open for the same website. Don't want to do that. Just for the external links, like the one that we've got down here. And I think that's all we need to know about links, hyperlinks. I think that's it. I mean, there's more to it, but that's the important stuff right there. So any questions about hyperlinks? Relative paths, absolute paths, titles, targets, anything like that?
For a multiple page website, what needs to be on each HTML, I guess, not document, or I guess document, like what needs to be across them the same so they can link together? Do you just need a navigation piece like on each one, or do you need the actual?
Are you talking about the assignment for next week?
Yeah, does like the index and the home and the about, does it all have to have the same information, or does it all just have to have the navigation part?
It should all have the same information, but just minimal information. I'll show you guys examples tomorrow, but just for now, let me go ahead and Well, let me go ahead and duplicate the file again. So I'm going to take the index here and duplicate it, rename it, and call this sample. So let's say that, oh, whoops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So I'm going to zoom out slightly. So when I say, okay, yeah, just skeleton pages are what we're looking for. And again, I'll show you examples tomorrow, but a skeleton page might be something like, maybe something like this. So you've got the doc type, you've got the HTML root element, you've got head and body, you've got some metas in here, title and a link. Actually, I'm not too concerned about these two just yet. Even if you just have the one, oh, whoops, hang on a second. So yeah, even if you just had the one character set meta, that's fine. Title, you'll have a little bit of CSS, but so you'll probably want to link to a CSS external file, even if you don't have one written yet. And then of the body element, I mean, there's a little bit of structuring here for the stuff that I know is going to go on every page, right? Like every page is going to have a big H1 at the top of the page. If there is a tagline or a description to go underneath it, a subhead, go ahead and put that in. If not, then that doesn't go there either. Navigation, you can either put it at the bottom of the page or the top, or put it inside the header. A lot of people put it inside the header these days. Didn't used to be that way, but it's new convention. And the main element here is mostly empty because, in fact, I probably wouldn't even have this guy here. It'll probably just be this, right? I know that what the name of the page is going to be. In this case, it's sample, but in your cases, it would either be home or about or featured or whatever. And then the footer, if you're going to have anything in here. And that's it. So this would be an example of like a skeleton page. So everything is in here. Everything that I plan to have in here is in here except for the main content of the page, the stuff that's going to be different on every page. And the only thing that I put inside main is the page name because I already know what that's going to be called, right? It's going to be home or about or whatever. So I think this would be a good example of a skeleton page. Notice that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. If you guys remind me, I'll at the end of the demo, I'll zip up the sample page and throw it on the classroom stream for you in case anyone wants to take a look at it. I wouldn't expect yours to look exactly like this either, right? Write your own page. Don't just copy and paste mine. You don't learn anything that way. Okay, cool. So just a preview then of where we're going to be going with the CSS. I'll do a couple of last little things with the type formatting because I'd like to wrap that up, and I'm going to show you guys why I chose this document with all the content in it for the rest of the type formatting. So, and then we'll maybe take it just a little bit further, and I'll start showing you what I would think about doing with these. Again, the textbook in Chapter 6 is all about floats, and I wouldn't use floats for any of this stuff at this point. Let me go ahead and open up my CSS page, my default.css. And this is the stuff that I did in the recording for today. So I'm just going to start with the paragraphs here, just to wrap this up. And what I was saying at the end of the recording, or sometime in the recording, that by default, the browser adds its own style sheet, right, which we override with our style sheet when we want to change the way this looks. And one thing that I might want to change the way this looks is I might want to get rid of the spacing here so that I can use first line indents on these paragraphs instead. It's kind of a typographic thing. You don't want to do both at the same time. You don't want to have a first line indent and do the paragraph spacing at the same time. It looks goofy. Let's go ahead and try it out. I'm just going to do paragraph and zoom in a bit again. And you guys know how to do a first line indent. It's text indent. It's one of our basic type formatting properties. And let's say 1M, which is the size of the type. That's a good size to get started with for a first line indent. And you see, I just don't think it looks good. If you want to, you guys can look through your bookshelves at home. You will not find any book that does both. It'll do one or the other. And with a book, it's almost always first line indent. But I do have some books, especially tutorial books that do paragraph spacing instead, and they'll never do both of these at the same time. So that's what I wanted to do when we were doing like the box model stuff, where I was doing like margin, border radius, things like that. The way that you take those off of a paragraph is simply to do a margin 0 on them, like so. And when I refresh over here, it takes those out. Now it's some other stuff here is now probably too close to each other, but that's okay. I can fix that later on. I just wanted to show about this and to do something to fix the other typographic problem with this, which is that in a section or chapter or what have you, if you have got first line indents, you still are not going to have a first line indent on the first paragraph. Why? Because it creates a weird, awkward, kind of goofy space like right here. Like it's quite like, wait, should the section now be indented so it lines up with that? And it's weird. It's not good. It's not right. So how in the world are we going to do this? Like I didn't put classes on these different paragraphs in here, so I can't use a class selector or anything to select them. How do I select for just the first paragraph and tell it not to do a first line indent? Well, it's actually easier to just select for the other paragraphs, and it's just a different kind of selector, another kind of compound selector. I'm going to take the first line indent back off of here so that here now looks like one paragraph. And here's our new selector. This is pretty cool. You guys are going to like this. You do a P plus P. What this means is select for any paragraph that follows another paragraph. So there has to be a paragraph in front of this one for the formatting to apply. That means it's going to format every paragraph in a section except for the first one. And you can probably see where we're going with this, right? We're going to leave the first one alone and do a first line indent on the other paragraphs. So let's go ahead and do our text indent. 1M, EM, that is. And refresh, and there we go. So I'm showing you that not just to teach you a little bit about typography, but also that that selector. It's a useful selector. And there are other selectors that, God, there's so many different kinds of selectors that we're just not going to have time for. I mean, there's attribute selectors, pseudo selectors. In fact, maybe we'll do a pseudo selector. But yeah, it's a very robust language, CSS is these days, in terms of the selection tools that you have available and in terms of the properties that are now available. So this same technique of P plus P, we're going to be using for the navigation element. Let's say that I want to space these out, and I want to put in between each one that pipe. Remember here in the original that I put a comment in here, just the placeholder text, I put these little pipe characters in between each one. Well, I don't have that in here. So how do I do that with CSS? Well, I'm going to want to do something with a border left on each of these last three, but I don't want to also put a border left in front of the first one because it'll look goofy. But I think I've got goofy on the brain now because of that resume, but it won't look good. It'll look weird. So we're going to use that same CSS technique. Instead of P plus P, we'll do A plus A so that it's only going to be applied to the anchors that follow another anchor. It'll only be applied to the second, third, and fourth of those links and not the first one. So let's just do a tiny bit of stuff with the anchors here. I'll go ahead and give myself another comment here. This is going to be the navigation. You'd probably say primary navigation or whatever. But let's go ahead and format these links a little bit here because I think these look really goofy. And there we go again. It's on my brain now. Okay, so I'll use a compound selector for these. I'm going to select not just A, but nav A, like this. And as you guys know, if you watch the recording, that means that I'm selecting for any anchor that's inside the nav element. And as you can see, that's what my primary navigation does. It's got these anchors inside a nav element. The reason I do that it's a little bit more specific. So let's say on one of my pages, I might have an in-class, like an anchor link somewhere here in, one of the paragraphs, or like we did on the sample, right? We might have, or was that on, no, that wasn't on the sample. One of these pages we had, oh, here it is right here. Okay, so here's an anchor. I don't want to format this one, and I will not because it's not inside the nav element. So that's the usefulness of doing a compound selector like this. It'll only going to grab the anchors that are inside the nav element, and it's going to leave that absolute anchor to National Geographic alone. So let's see here. I am going to do, what am I going to get started with? Let's do color. So I don't really like the colors that we've got here. And what I'm going to do is I will start with RGB. And one of the things that's kind of nice about code and other languages, it'll give you a little drop down of the colors that you've already used here. So I will probably start with this kind of middle color here, the 200, 220, 240. And this is not going to be good enough. If I refresh over here, so it kind of works. It just doesn't really look very link-like in terms of color. So if I'm dealing with these, if I want to increase the saturation of a color, then I want to increase one of these numbers and decrease the other two. Or I could just decrease these two here. This is the blue channel up here. I'm going to leave that the way it is. And I'll try making these progressively smaller to see if we can get a more saturated color. That's what people expect from hyperlinks. They expect it to be a brighter color than the rest of the stuff on the page. So maybe instead of 200, 220, and 240, I'll do, let's see, like 160 and 200. So spacing out the numbers a little bit and leaving this one right where it is. And then when I refresh, yeah, it's not much yet, but it's starting to get a bit more. So I take this down to 180. So that's a difference of 60. So this one will now be 120. Not 1120, but 120. Thank you. All right, now we're starting to get there. It's starting to look more saturated than the other blues on the page. Now notice that it's not applying to this guy down here. I'm going to have to do something else with that if I'm going to format these differently. But I'm just going to try taking this up to 255 and see if that... Yeah, I think that's starting to do it. That's looking a bit more like a link, but I think I actually like the 240 better. So there we go. So let's see, what else was I going to show? Okay, so about the underline. Just say, okay, the underline is, as long as this is in a different color and a sufficiently bright color, you don't actually need the underline, I don't think. People will understand that this is a link without seeing the underline. Now, I will say that underlines look a little better than they used to. They used to be these ugly big bars that would go like right through the tail of the G there. They don't do that anymore, but still. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another text property. Now, we looked at 3 text properties, I believe. We did text align, we did text indent, and text transform, I believe, to turn something uppercase. Here's a 4th one that we did not go over before. And this is text decoration. And text decoration is for putting underlines on things or taking the underline off of something. That's what text decoration does for underlines. So if I do text decoration none and go over here and refresh, oh, there go the underlines. Oh, I like that better. I don't know about you guys. I might want to make this text a little bit larger, put it into a sans serif typeface, something like that. But for now, yeah, it looks more like links, oddly, despite having just taken the underline off, which is one of our link cues. But yeah, I'm liking the way it looks better. And I'll even show you a little bit of interactivity here. Now we've got the cursor and we've got the title that's popping up. So if I hover and leave it there for a moment, I get the title tooltip. And I've also got this, but sometimes it's nice to have another visual cue for users. So what I'll do here is I'm going to do a pseudo selector. And we're not going to be able to get into these as a list, but this is going to be probably the one that's used the most often that I know of. And that is to do a different piece of formatting for when the user hovers over this. Now, this is the thing that you normally expect. Oh, yeah, I'm going to do that in my JavaScript or whatever. And once upon a time, that's what we had to do. But now it's built into the CSS. So take a look at this. I'm going to do A for inside nav colon hover. And what happens then, whenever you see a colon or two colons, you're talking about a pseudo selector here. And what that means basically is that there is no A hover element, right? There's a pseudo element that happens when the user hovers over an element. That's where the naming convention comes from. And let's say when the user hovers over this, I'll bring the underline back. This is a pretty common thing to do, actually. So nav A will be text decoration none, except when the user hovers over it, and then they will have text decoration underline. So I refresh over here, and hopefully you guys can see. Let me zoom in a bit here. Hover over it, and when you do, you get those underlines back. So CSS isn't something we used to think of as being interactive, just styling. But now some of the stuff is that we think of as being interactive is now built into CSS, and plenty more stuff besides just this too. Okay, any questions so far? I promise I will not go on as long as I did on Tuesday, but I do want to show you guys where we're heading after this. So let me go ahead and give you a little bit of a preview. I'm going to select for nav here, especially since the reading for tomorrow has been axed, in favor of this. So let me first give it some padding top. Is that right? Yeah, it's too close to that kind of tagline-y thing. So let me just give it a padding top, which is just a box model thing for right now. I'm just going to get it out on its own a little bit more. There we go. And I'm going to do, on the nav element, display flex. So we're going to do like display flex and display grid are going to be our two means of doing layout instead of doing floats and so on. There is a whole another topic about position, or absolute, fixed, relative position. There's so many different ways of doing things. But now all it did so far is it got rid of that space in between those that I was kind of counting on before, but that's okay. We're going to fix that. I'm going to do flex flow, row, no wrap, which again, just a preview. You guys don't have to remember this right now, but this says, yeah, I want this to be flowing along a row instead of a column, and I don't want it to wrap along multiple lines. And when I save that, nothing happens, but still, I need to do that for the next bit, which is justify content space around. And I go over here and refresh, and I've just taken that navigation and spread it across the page like so. And so this is Flexbox. This is a very simple example of Flexbox. Now, something that I'm going to want to do, I'm also going to want to do, remember that compound selector we did before, P plus P, that only grabs a P if it's preceded by another P? Let's do the same thing with A plus A here. I'll do nav A plus A to keep things consistent. And do a border left. And I'll do thin solid. And let's do our RGB value. I guess this, we want one of the lighter colors, don't we? So I guess this guy right here, not the super light one. And you see exactly the same thing that we did down here where we formatted every paragraph except for the first one in each section. I just put a border left on each of these three, but there isn't one over here, which we wouldn't need. We just want them in between here. Now there's a couple more hoops that I have to jump through in order to get those guys going. And let's see, what do I need to do here? I made some notes beforehand. Content. Yeah, let's see. I think we just do flex 1 on this. And then text align center, and that should do it. There we go. So we've now got a navigation that's spread across, and it's not like absolutely positioned, so if the page changes width or whatever, then it just stretches to fit. And then we've got that pipe in between each one as a border instead of actually typing it into the content, which is exactly how we want to do it. So again, if that last bit was kind of like a brain exploder, don't worry about it. We're going to revisit this. I'm going to show you this exact tutorial again. I mainly wanted to show you like the text decoration and the A hover, and then the rest of it was preview.
The flex 1 value do?
The flex 1, it applies to multiple different values. It's shorthand. So I believe it covers flex basis and flex grow and flex shrink and sets them all to 1, I believe. I'll have to go check my documentation again, which is exactly that CSS tricks link that I have.
What would happen if you change the value on 1? What would that do to the page? Well, I'm just curious.
Let's give it a try here. I believe the 0 is the default. Let's see what happens if we take it up to 2 here. It might not do anything. If they're all the same, then it might come, yeah, it comes out to the same thing. So I think what really happens is that you need to give them some value here. And as long as it's the same value for all of them. Now see, flex 0, that's the default, so that takes us back out to where we were before we applied the flex. But I think that, yeah, if we put like flex 5 on here, I think that should come out to the same thing as 1. But it's more common just to do it like this.
Okay.
So I don't have exactly all the details because I just kind of use it. But all the details you could want are in that first link that's in the Friday reading for this week. Good question. Other questions? Okay, it is time for me to stop the demo then and give you guys at least a little bit of lab time. Not as much as I had planned, but at least it's something. I promise there will be more lab time tomorrow. We'll stop